announcements for the good of the group that we have today from anybody else?
Just
Well, Jim,
June 7th. Keep that on your calendar. June 7th, the golf outing. I've probably said it 100 times to this group, but if you can spread it around, we'll have more information forthcoming. Thanks, Jim.
And I guess the only other comment that I would have is I thought today was a green St. Patrick's Day, not an orange St. Patrick's Day, Mr. Purvis. So I guess you must be from that northern part of Ireland, huh? Okay, well, with that, Chuck, are you going to do your own introduction and keep it to less than 5 minutes, or do you need somebody else to introduce you and Sharon?
I think I can probably handle it. And please note that our two speakers are wearing green today. Happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. And really, I want to start off saying, yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about residential real estate. I'm working with Coldwell Banker. Sharon is going to talk a little bit about commercial real estate. Sharon's working with Berkshire Hathaway. But one thing I want to point out to everybody, in one of the recent Pittsburgh Business Times, they had the top 20 people to know in commercial real estate. And one of those 20 people is our own Sharon Scheidmantel. And I'd like to point out that only out of the 20 people, only 4 women, I think probably only 2 that really deal in commercial real estate, selling commercial real estate, buying commercial real estate. And most all those people are from inside Pittsburgh, downtown Pittsburgh. She's one of the few people that are out, I guess you'd say, in the hinterlands. So congratulations to Sharon. She is, when we talk about experts and real estate experts, Sharon truly is, and recognized that way. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this is what happens when you're the program director and somebody bails out on you. They all point the finger at you and say, all right, then you do the program. So here I am with a real estate program, which is fairly easy to pull together, actually, for me and for Sharon. And one thing about Pittsburgh real estate that's interesting is that it's not that interesting. Whereas you have so many places around the country that will see big gains, big losses, big news about real estate, Pittsburgh just kind of plods along. We don't go up too high. We don't go down too high, which really, I think most of the people here in Pittsburgh would feel is a good thing. And I actually have, I'll see if I can share the screen. I have a couple statistics from the area as well, PowerPoint. Let's see, can you see that now?
Yes.
All right, I'm not real good at getting it on the entire screen, but this is, it shows for 2018, 19, and 20. Home sales for less than $1 million. This is single family homes, townhouses, condos. And one of the interesting things, 2018 to 2019, fairly static, a slight increase. What was really somewhat amazing is in 2020 with COVID, and you see the 3 months there in April, May, and June, when literally we weren't able to do any in-person transactions, anything that had to be done. We were not, in Pennsylvania, real estate was not considered an essential service. In most states, it was. You know, people have to live in houses, and so they were able to continue to operate and do things in person. In Pennsylvania, we weren't for about 3 months, and sales dropped quite a bit. You could still do virtual showings. You could do, you know, it was difficult doing inspections. So when you see April, May, and June in 2020, you can see how it went down. But you can see how the pent-up demand hit come July. And interestingly, the sales for 2020 increased I think it was something like 14% overall for the year from 2019. There's a lot of pent up demand. The other thing that's interesting, when you go, hopefully, to the next one, showing the inventory. And this is really the interesting point about real estate sales here in Allegheny County. And I did take a look at Butler County, and Butler County is very similar. The trends pretty much track what happened in Allegheny County as well. That listed properties, the amount of listed properties went down significantly. So that by December, let's see, the MSI, which is the months of supply inventory. In other words, they're taking a look at all the houses that are on the market and taking a look at the usual pace of sales and figuring out how long, given that usual pace of sales, how long that inventory will last. A normal inventory is maybe 3 or 4 months. If it's less than that, then it's called a seller's market. If it's more than that, it's considered a buyer's market. It's down to 1.8 months in Allegheny County, which is very low. So that one of the things that we saw when you see house sales, particularly when you see house sales, say in the 400 to 500,000 and below, when a house came on the market, there was tremendous demand. I had one house this past year where we saw, I had a buyer, we saw maybe 50 houses. He put in about 4 or 5 different offers. One offer, he ended up putting in, there were 13 other offers. I think it was a house that was listed at 189,000. He put in an offer at 199,000, went 10,000 over the list price. It ended up selling for about 210,000, way over the list price. You run into problems sometimes when you get people going over the list price like that, because if they're financing it, there's a question as to whether it'll appraise and you'll be able to get the amount of money you need from the bank based on the price that it's selling for. But that's the way it's been going. Almost every house, say from 4 to 500,000 and below, that's been on the market this past year has had multiple offers, and usually, unless it's been really overpriced, has been snapped up within days, and certainly within a week or two. So it's been a very competitive market, very much a seller's market. And the other thing, of course, that does too, and you see the ups and downs, we're starting to see a little bit of a plateau, but the median sale prices have gone up too. The average and median sale prices have gone up as well. So it's an interesting market to deal in. We're seeing a lot of the same thing early in 2021 as well. Now we'll see if I can get this other thing up here. The other thing that's interesting, of course, when you're talking about residential sales is if you're trying to sell your house or if you're trying to buy a house, how does the process work? And that's really for realtors, where realtors come into play. Let's see. And can you, lost it. Can you see that one? No?
I think you have to stop sharing whatever screen or window you were sharing and then start to share again.
Gotcha. All right, let me see.
You should have a little thing to stop share.
Yep. And now I shall try sharing again. Now can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a flow chart. You have 2 different situations. You have a situation where you're buying a house and when you're selling a house. And we'll start with when you're buying a house. And really, when you're buying a house, although this is listed a little bit further down, the first thing you want to do, particularly if you're going to be financing, is you want to get pre-approved for a mortgage. A lot of sellers won't even consider any offers you want to make unless you can show that you're pre-approved. So that really is the initial step that anybody who wants to buy a house should make. Now, some people are able to do it with cash, but even then, you're going to have to show from the bank, you're going to have to show that you have funds available for a sale as well as kind of a precondition of moving forward. So when I'm dealing with a buyer, you sit down with a buyer, you find out what they're looking for, you make sure that they're pre-approved, and you begin that house search. The West Penn Multi-List is a great tool. It can help you narrow down looking for houses. You can set up, you can save searches so that if you're looking at a particular area, you're looking for a particular price, that you can find all of that out. And you can set that up so that that information is sent to the buyer. The buyer can take a look at it and decide what houses would he really be interested in. And when you go on the multi-list, you'll find pictures, up to 25 pictures of the house, the different rooms, the area, so that you can really get an initial feel for whether this would work or not work for you. Then the next thing to do is if the buyer is interested, then you want to set it up so that they can go and take a look at it. And they now have a mechanism that you can actually, you don't have to call the listing agent. You can actually go online, and there is a mechanism for signing up for a time to go see the house. Then if they like the house, they decide, all right, let's see what the price is. You talk about what kind of price they would want to offer. And then there's a 14-page sales agreement that we use here in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is also, it's interesting because Pennsylvania is a state that doesn't really utilize attorneys in the sale of real estate. Sometimes the attorneys will come into play when there's problems, and this may very well be a little bit different in the commercial real estate, but in the residential real estate, we have forms that are available through the Pennsylvania Real Estate Association, whether it be, well, there's literally 100 forms on there that you can use. And it's not that attorneys don't get involved. They do get involved, but they get involved at the beginning. They get involved with the Real Estate Association in Pennsylvania to draft these forms. In other states, Illinois is an example, when you want to buy a house, you find out the house you want to get through the realtor, but then you immediately bring an attorney in to draft documents. Some states go that way. Some states go the way Pennsylvania goes. So we already have this forms. You fill out this 14-page sales agreement. You submit it. You hope that it gets accepted. But as I said, in this day and age, almost every house that's out there on the market has 3 or 4 or 5 offers already. So you have to decide, am I going to offer what they want, what the list price is? Am I going to bargain a little bit and go below that? Am I actually going to maybe offer a little bit more? Those are things that you have to decide. You have to decide what kind of mortgage there's going to be. And then there's a lot of different things that you have to decide whether you want to. Do you want to make it contingent upon an inspection? Most everybody would want to do that. Is it contingent on you getting financing? So there's a lot of contingencies involved too. So when you have made an agreement, if that agreement gets accepted, that's just the start of the process really then. Because then you've got to, as you'll see on that list, you've got to make sure that the mortgage application gets made. You more than likely will have to set up an inspection. Once the inspection is made, a lot of times it'll bring up different things that need to be done to the house that might be a problem. Maybe there's a problem in the basement. Maybe it seems that there's been leaks down there. Maybe there's problems with the electrical. So you have to then decide, given what you find out through the inspection, what are you going to ask the homeowner to repair or fix? And then you have another negotiation that goes on as far as what they're willing to do, what you're willing to accept. Assuming that you get through that, there's also, you have to go to the title company. The title company will work with you on doing a title search. The mortgage will be working with getting an appraisal to make sure that the house appraises for the value that you're buying it for. And then finally, I mean, it's usually at least a month to a 2-month process to get all this done. Then you can get down to a closing. You've got all the closing documents that have to be done. You've got liens and things of that nature that have to be taken care of, usually by the seller. So it's a pretty complicated, involved process to get, number one, to get to the point where you actually have an accepted sales agreement, to then actually getting to the closing. The other thing I was going to show, which is it tracks the same thing. Now, can you see that? Whoop. Now, maybe I have to, let's see. Now, what I'm trying to do is get up. You see that one?
Yep.
All right, seller flow. So you've got a lot of reciprocal things that the seller has to do. The seller, when he does get a number of offers in, he has to sit down with the realtor and decide, what do I want? Do I want to accept one of these? Do I not want to accept one of these? Which one do I want to accept? Someone might be offering a little bit more money, but then there's a lot of contingencies. Maybe a mortgage contingency. Maybe there's a contingency based on selling their property. So there's a decision-making process that goes on with the seller. And of course, actually backing up just a little bit from that too, the seller, when the seller gets together and lists the property with a realtor, the seller and the realtor have to sit down and figure out, all right, what needs to be done to this property to put it in the best shape for sales, so that you have to take a look and decide whether, whether there's, usually most houses are relatively cluttered. And so you have to declutter it. You have to figure out what is going to appeal to a buyer. Sometimes you might suggest they paint a room. Sometimes you might suggest that they clean floors and rugs. They might want to do some work outside. So you want to do these things in advance before you actually put it on the market to make it as marketable as possible. Then you get into the showings. Then you get into offers. And then once the offer comes in and you decide to accept one, then there's some things that you have to take care of on your side. If there's an inspection contingency, the buyer might want you to make a number of repairs that involves a lot of money. Or he may simply say, look, instead of making all these repairs, give me X amount of dollars off on the purchase. The seller and the realtor are also responsible for making sure that lien letters, tax certifications are taken care of. If you're in a HOA, a homeowners association, then you have to get those documents, updated documents, and get them to the buyer. So there are a number of obligations on the seller's side as well. Hopefully, after a month or 2 months after you've gone through this process, hopefully gotten over a few more hurdles, you get to the closing and you're actually able to sell the house or buy the house. That's the process. It's an administrative, complicated process to get from start to finish. And it involves negotiating. It also involves staying on top of a lot of these different time frames, making sure that everything that needs to get done gets done. You don't want to get to closing day and then find out that you can't close that day because X, Y, and Z haven't been done, and that it's maybe your fault that it hasn't gotten done. So that is kind of the long and short of residential sales. And right now, I'll just say, any questions on that process or on the market in general as far as residential real estate goes?
Well, Chuck, what are the hottest areas around here for home sales? What's most in demand?
Well, stuff down in the South Hills and Peters Township, stuff up here in the North Hills, Pine Richland, school districts sometimes have an impact. So Pine Richland, North Allegheny areas, South Butler, Cranberry, Zelienople is, I think, starting to boom. The area just north of the Allegheny River, kind of from Etna on down, is viewed as a spot that could end up getting pretty hot. And we've seen places, we saw Children's Hospital go in, and that increased, that just so dramatically increased home sales in that area. And then you've seen areas like some of the areas out Baker Square, out kind of in the Homewood area around there, has become really hot with the different companies that have moved in out there. But we're in a really hot area right here: Pine Richland, Mars, Adams Township. I think that all are pretty hot. And as I said, right now, anything that's out there practically has been pretty hot. Anything in the North Hills. Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh, you've got the extra taxes, and that's somewhat of a negative. And then you've got the school district, which is not considered that great. That's somewhat of a negative. Butler County, obviously, you have the lower taxes. That's a benefit. So you have to kind of weigh these things, see whether they have kids, whether that's a factor that weighs in or not. Any other residential questions?
I'm thinking.
You're starting to see more and more situations where you're having people collect multiple bids on certain dates. Sellers not wanting to necessarily consider any kind of home inspection exceptions and things of that nature because the market is so competitive. I've been hearing of those types of situations.
That's one of those things where you're weighing and evaluating what's going to make a deal or not make a deal. Yes, it appeals to the seller if you don't have an inspection contingency in there. But if I'm a buyer, I would not recommend to anybody, unless it's a really newer house, but if has any kind of age to it, it's fine to take a look. It's fine to walk through. It's fine to make the visual inspection. So you don't know what's, not visible and what problems there might be. So yeah, that becomes one of those issues. If you have a cash sale versus a sale that's being financed, that's more desirable. How much money you're willing to put down initially can have an impact. So there's different things that you can do to make your bid more appealing. That's one of those really tricky ones, though, as far as the inspection goes, whether to waive that or not. But yeah, you do see it sometimes. That can be something that can make a difference for a seller. And then the other thing is sometimes you get older houses that might be selling as is, so that they're basically saying, you can buy it, you can have an inspection, but I'm not going to do anything. You're taking it as is. Make your offer accordingly.
I have a question on the negotiation part of the picture. Let's say a house is on the market for $200,000 and it's hot. Someone offers $200,000. The next day, someone offers $210,000. The next day, someone offers $220,000. What is the responsibility of the real estate agent? Does he or she have to tell the prospective buyers that there's a higher offer? And does he or she have to give a number of what the higher offer is?
No, the real estate agent is an agent for the seller. So your responsibility is to that seller. If I'm a buyer's agent, then and offers are coming in, one of the things that you can do is you can put time frames within which, you know, you have to respond to this offer within 24 hours or 2 days or whatever. Usually it'll be a fairly short time period. And usually when they start getting offers in, you know, you kind of, once again, you're balancing, all right, how long do we wait? If we wait very long, or some of these other offers going to drop off, because these other people might want to make offers on different houses as well. But no, you don't have an obligation to tell the buyers or the buyers' agents what's out there. And that's kind of, that's part of the negotiating. You can tell them certain things as far as there are other offers out there, they're above the list price. If you want to be serious about this, then you better be above the list price. You know, you don't want to tell anything that's not true. But yes, you can utilize how much information you're giving out to try and get people's bids up. And usually that's what will happen is at some point you're going to draw the line and say, all right, I'm taking offers up to this time. Then you see how many offers you have, and then you'll usually send out a request for your highest and best offer. But even then, you don't have to respond to everybody. Basically, you pick one based on a variety of decision-making issues, how much money is being offered, how many contingencies are there, how much hand money is there, things of that nature. You want to make sure that you're picking an offer that you think will actually go all the way to closing. So there's a lot of things that come into it, but no, you don't have to tell a whole lot of things as far as that goes. But where you get into an interesting issue is if you're representing the seller, and then you also have a buyer that is interested in that property. I mean, personally, I view that as kind of an inherent conflict, and I would pass the buyer on to someone else in my company. Some people don't want to do that. Some people will want to represent both. But if you are a realtor for one of those buyers, that's one of the things that you can request from the selling agent is, you know, let me know, are there any other buyers who you represent? Theoretically, you could steer the seller maybe toward your buyer. You should be as upfront with the seller as possible as far as, you know, what the pluses and minuses for all of the potential buyers are. But I mean, you run into some inherent conflicts like that potentially. And Sharon might have some views on that as well. And actually, if there aren't any other questions.
Jock,
Okay, Dallas?
how detrimental is it to the sale if after you've got an inspection, you say, fine, you go ahead and pay for it and we'll reduce the price? Does that mess up the sale?
Most sellers, that's one of the issues that come into play, particularly if there's multiple offers. I think some sellers will actually get their own inspection in advance so that they have an idea of what may be coming down the road with other inspections that the buyers are making. I think most sellers anticipate, particularly if you've got a house that's 10 years or more, 10 years or older, that there probably will be a few things that might need to be fixed up. But you're not expecting to make any real significant improvements. And that could be the difference between I'll pick this one or I'll pick that one if there are multiple offers. If there's only one offer, then you have to decide, all right, how far am I willing to go? Most people will do some minor fix. Often what they'll do is they'll want to simply maybe give them a credit rather than have to go ahead and do it themselves. And a lot of times the buyers would rather have it that way. That way they get to take care of the problems themselves, have their own people do it. So just, rather than getting A, B, and C fixed, give me a $1,500 credit.
And you don't feel that's detrimental to the sale?
It depends. As I say, that's one of those things you're balancing. If there's multiple offers, some people might want less fixed up. Some people might want more fixed up. Well, I take it back because I'm actually getting this out of order. The inspection comes in after there is a deal done. So actually at that point, there is just one person dealing with it. Usually that's 2 or 3 weeks down the road, so that the seller is already into, getting everything ready. The seller probably is not going to want to restart the whole process again, put the house back out on the market, so that the seller is willing to make some accommodations usually. But once again, it's how far do you push the envelope? What all am I going to demand? Yes, if you demand too much, it can kill a sale. If you don't do enough on the buyer's part, the buyer then has an opportunity to get out. So that's why that contingency is so important. And you have that initial negotiation for the house and how much you're going to pay. You literally have a second negotiation. So it's almost like you have 2 opportunities to negotiate, two bites of the apple when it comes to the inspection. So yeah, it becomes an issue. Yeah, it can kill a sale on either side.
Hey, Chuck, we're running a little tight on time here. I know, Joe, you have a question, but Sharon, why don't we give Sharon an opportunity to
Go,
give some
Sharon.
updated information, and then if people want to hang on and ask more questions, and you guys are willing to stay on a little bit longer than 1 o'clock, that would be great. So
Good idea. Go, Sharon.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day from someone who's 100% Irish, despite my last name. So wanted to say, I'm going to just kind of focus on the differences between residential and commercial real estate. I'm actually the commercial regional manager for Berkshire Hathaway. And in that capacity, my job is to keep our residential agents out of trouble when they dabble in commercial real estate. And there are quite a few stories I could tell. Maybe we'll do another segment on the trouble that agents get into with dabbling. Dabbling is just never a good idea to do in any walk of life. So the thing I want to tell you a little bit about, those of us we have a couple bankers on here, we don't really have written pre-approvals for commercial buyers. It's really hard to get a bank to make a commitment to do in writing a pre-qualification letter. You kind of have to just have a conversation with whoever their banker is and pretty much come right out and say, well, do they have money and can they do this transaction? Because you don't get a letter like you do in the residential world. The flow charts that were presented by Chuck, pretty much very similar in the commercial world. The only thing that we add is in the inspection phase, if you are using a lender, it will require a phase 1 environmental inspection to determine whether the property had previous uses that could be questionable, such as a dry cleaner, such as a gasoline station. Could there be tanks underneath? Could there be underground oil tanks that need to be removed? And then that becomes the seller's problem. You get a lot of commercial buyers that think they're real smart and are going to pay cash for a property, and they neglect to do phase 1s, and they find out later on that it was a previous dry cleaning plant, and they might have $50,000 worth of remediation that becomes their responsibility after the closing. So it doesn't happen if you're using a lender, because the lender requires that environmental inspection. But if you're paying cash, your agent should advise you to have that inspection done. The other thing is we do use the Multilist. I use the Multilist because I'm affiliated with a residential firm, but we have 2 other websites that are commercial and are very expensive to subscribe to, known as CoStar and LoopNet. I would advise anybody that if you're going to be doing any kind of commercial real estate, stick with a commercial agent who has access to those websites. Hit them up right away and say, do you subscribe to CoStar and LoopNet? And if they don't, you probably should find somebody who does commercial real estate as a routine, because there's just so many nuances to it and so many problems that come into play. Chuck talked about dual agency, where that means that if you're listing the property and you're also representing the buyer, you're a dual agent and you owe both parties your same degree of honesty and duty. In the residential world, if you list a home, you have about a 1 in 10 chance that you're going to be representing the buyer. 1 in 10. So almost always another buyer's agent brings that buyer to the residential transaction. It's completely the opposite in commercial. I would say that 8 or 9 times out of 10, I am representing both parties. And yes, it's a very delicate dance that you play, but I prefer it for 2 reasons. Number 1, you make more money. Number 2, I have more control of the transaction. I'm not having to work with another agent, so it's all on me. I would rather have the control of the transaction, and so I prefer that for those 2 reasons. And just to talk a little bit about, you know, the multiple offers, we don't really see that very much in commercial real estate, except for in one category, and that's in multifamily. Right this moment, actually it started at 12:30, there's a closing happening for one of my listings. It was a 6-unit building on the North Shore in very dilapidated condition. It had appraised for $300,000. It was in an estate. I listed it for $395 in the Multilist and elsewhere. We had, I knew I was going to have multiple offers on that property. So what my system is, I had a 2-hour time frame of an open house on a Saturday from 2 to 4. We had 20 parties through in 2 hours. Out of those 20 parties, we had 5 offers written. So we sat down with the estate attorney and the executrix, and we looked at which was the best. At $395, we were listed, and it's closing right this very moment for $420,000. So buyers are paying an inordinate amount of money for multifamily properties. And in this case, when this closed, I hope it closed about a half hour ago. I didn't get any other notifications that it didn't. But that buyer is going to be paying $420,000 for a building that cash flows that should have sold for $300,000. And whether it did appraise, which it should have never, but it did. And when he closes today, he's going to be in a negative cash flow situation. And we're seeing more and more and more of that. And we see people who, I had a property in Crafton, a 17-unit building. We had multiple offers on that too. In my mind, it was worth $950,000. We were asking $1.2 million. We got $1.2 million. And what did it appraise for? $950,000. So the buyers, and I'm sure Jim could comment on this too, buyers are just adding more cash to the transaction because they desperately want these properties. I guess it's that they're looking to just diversify and have real estate in their portfolio, but right now it just doesn't make any sense to me at all. But I'm happy to be taking advantage of this crazy situation. But otherwise, all other aspects of commercial real estate are very stable. I had my best year ever last year. You might not have expected that. And the only other segment of commercial real estate that I see that's really going to be impacted and really hurting is going to be retail. Obviously, restaurants are not going to be opening back up. Retail is going to be the one category of commercial real estate that's going to be very challenging with this upcoming year, but everything else should be very stable. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Sharon, just a quick question. With so many people working from home these days, a lot will go back to work in offices, but do you see any kind of downturn for offices, office buildings?
Yes, in downtown Pittsburgh, but not in the suburbs. Yes, indeed, most of the office tenants are shrinking their square footage. But I've also had a client of mine who's an architect who called me in the midst of this pandemic and said, hey, Sharon, would you show me that 3,000 square feet that you have down on Babcock Boulevard? And his name's Felix. I said, Felix, you need 1,500 square feet. You have like 4 employees or 5 or whatever. And I've been showing him 1,500 square foot spaces. And he said to me, no, I want to spread my folks out. So that was a little bit of a surprising remark. I had seen everybody downsizing, but this guy wanted to spread his people out, so he wanted to double his office space. So you see a little bit of quirkiness there, but I think for the most part, we're going to see a lot of, you still need to collaborate with your coworkers, and I think that that's lacking. And I think we're going to see the gradual return to office space, just not in downtown. I just moved an attorney, a law firm that was by PPG Place. They sold their building and they were renting back, and they wanted to buy an office condo in Ross Township. I sold them the top floor of a building in Ross, and it was 3,500 square feet. And they were really anxious to not have to go back into town. His comments were, every time I walk out of my front door, there's a homeless person in the vestibule. And it's dangerous. My female employees don't like coming downtown anymore. And so I see a big exodus from downtown Pittsburgh into the suburbs. By the way, he's saving $2,000 a month in parking. So that's, I think, a big, big thing we're going to see. What's the use of going into downtown Pittsburgh anymore? I have 2 lady friends that live in downtown. And as soon as this, the rioting and as soon as the pandemic hit, they said, get me the heck out of here. And, so they're moving back out into the suburbs, into townhomes. It's just, there's nothing to do. There's no restaurants open. There's no shows to see. There's no ball games. All the reasons that there were to move into town are no longer there. Is that going to go back to normal? Yes, it will. But in the meantime, the downtown real estate market, residentially and commercially, is taking a big beating.
Hey, Sharon and Chuck, maybe you guys can comment on this. Typically in Pittsburgh, real estate values tend to move upward, but move up and down within a fairly narrow band. Other places around the country, that disparity of high and low is much more significant. Seems like, to me anyhow, from my perspective, we've moved into a little bit different territory than we've ever been accustomed to before. Given some of the examples that you provided, I think there could be some folks who are hurt pretty significantly if the markets retrench, which they almost invariably do from time to time. And I think it will be a lesson for many folks on the commercial and the residential side who just see this increase going on forever.
Well, and in the commercial world, half of my business is actually leasing office space, retail space, restaurants. And so half of my business is leasing. And I think that the landlords in Pittsburgh in general are in for a very rude awakening, that the rental rates in all classifications are going to go down. I have a couple of people that own restaurants. As an example, everybody knows where Bacon was in Warrendale, next to House of a Thousand Beers. And I just talked to someone who had looked at Bacon to take it over. They're still looking for $35 per square foot, triple net. And I will tell you, that landlord is never going to see $35 triple net ever again. He'll be lucky to get 20 bucks a foot. Same thing, I showed the old Emporio's meatball place in the Village of Pine, which was a great retail restaurant space. I showed that maybe 3 or 4 months ago. That landlord, you know, they're just digging their heels in. They think they're going to get $33 a square foot. Those days are long gone. So I think there's going to be a big awakening for the landlords who own retail and restaurant properties, but they haven't gotten there yet, but they will. This summer is going to be crazy.
With residential, it's kind of supply and demand, and there just is not a great supply right now. So I don't see any major dip. Where you run into some problems potentially, we have a lot of higher end houses that have been built in recent years. You know, if you 600, 700, 800, 900,000, those are moving more slowly. They're still moving. If there's any area that might get hit at some point here, it'll probably be there. But for the foreseeable future, if you're talking 500,000 and down, there's just not, once again, it's supply and demand, and the supply is not there. It's going to take a while for more houses to be built, for more people to be putting stuff up for sale.
Chuck, can you estimate what the average appreciation in residential real estate has been in Adams and Pine and Richland in the last 2 years?
You know, the stuff that I had looked at, it incorporated all of Allegheny County, and it was something like, per year was something like close to 3%. So it wasn't anything real significant, but things have bumped up this year. I think, you know, I think it was on one of the slides that I had. You know, it's going up more.
Well,
Right
if I
now.
can interject, I can tell you what the president of our company told us, and it almost blew my head off. It's always been 2 to 3% appreciation in Pittsburgh, 2 to 3%, 2 to 3%. The sales from 2019 to 2020 increased, and the values, I should say, the values of residential increased 17%.
And I'm looking at my numbers here, and both median and average, it shows 14%, but pretty astronomical compared to what normally happens here in Pittsburgh.
And that's why now's the time to sell.
And and those numbers, the 14% was all of Allegheny County, for Pine, for Adams, you know, that probably is bumped up even a little bit more.
Sharon, to your point on now it being the time to sell, I have pre-retirees and retiree clients who are looking to sell their house that, you know, 4 or 5 bedrooms, that's just empty nesters rattling around, and then thinking about going to the, you know, the downsizing. They might be downsizing in square footage, but they're not downsizing in price.
They are not.
And so
They're
that's been
not.
really frustrating for people. They want to sell, but then it's just a lateral move. So I don't know if more properties need to be built in that, you know, 55 plus community type stuff, or what the plans are.
They can't build those 55 plus communities fast enough. I sold actually, and I referred it because in my capacity, I'm not allowed to do residential anymore at Berkshire Hathaway, but I referred a listing in Pine Township, just that typical house, 4 or 5 bedrooms in Pine Richland. And those sellers ended up building in Traditions of America, or, you know, out in Cranberry, I think that's the name of it. And the house that they left in Pine Richland sold for about $500, and that smaller new construction, but high high finishes, high degree of finishes, all the amenities and so on, was about 500. It was definitely a lateral move. So nobody is really, really downsizing these days, at least not from a value standpoint, unless you could convince somebody that lives in a 4 or 5 bedroom house to move into like a little 3-bedroom ranch in Ross Township. Then you're downsizing, but we're just not seeing so much of that.
And there's a Traditions of America that's going up on 228 in Pine Township as well. And yeah, the starting price is about 400,000 and up. And that's the problem. People are looking for ranch houses, so that, first floor bedrooms and things like that. And most of it is newer builds, and it's more expensive. And what they're selling is bigger, might in some respects be nicer, but it's maybe 15, 20, 25 years old. And so, yeah, you're not, you're cutting back size but not cutting back on price.
Hey, Chuck,
Just a
it's-
comment from our business in general. There were a couple events, one of which was the freeze in Texas that shut down just about every refinery that was down there. The net effect is there's nothing being produced, nothing made. And I'm talking about solvents, resins, wallboard, etc. So the prices have skyrocketed in those raw materials. And that combined with the traffic that's been clogging both ports on stuff coming in from China and India is a major problem. Our suppliers are telling us they don't expect any product to come in until the end of April, which means I have to sell what I have and then I can't even re-up it. And some of the pricing is just scary. It's gone from like 40 cents a pound to $3.50 a pound. And I know that wood has tripled in price. And it's just because the need is there, but the supply is not. So I don't expect the cost of building to come down anytime soon. And I would, if you need paint, I'd go out and buy it now because it's going to be severely affected by what's happening in the solvent business.
But as we said, for the supply and demand, one of the things that's going to help resolve that is when new housing is built. But, based on what you're saying too, a lot of builders are probably going to push back a ways. They're not going to be so inclined to be building here in the near future.
Yeah, and I think it's going to take a heck of a lot longer to build a house. Because they're all waiting 3 months for plywood, they're waiting 3 months for wallboard. So it may have taken 4 months to build a house. In the future, it may take 8 months.
And the other thing you're seeing is with so many people working at home, a lot of people are just thinking about, all right, what do I need to do around here to make this more efficient as far as a home office space, adding on here, adding on there. So a lot of people are doing that too, rather than trying to go out and buy something new.
Okay. Is
Well,
anybody
Jim
else-
had to leave, so
Yeah.
yeah.
No wonder he wanted to end.
So Sharon, I guess the one person who's getting rich in this multi-dwelling place are the guys who write the books of how to get rich by buying multi-dwelling places, because there's a lot of them, get rich by investing in real estate. You don't have to do anything, just collect the money. So
Well, if only it worked that way. I used to always say if there was not risk in real estate, we'd all be Donald Trump, but I don't use that line anymore.
all right, if anybody else have any last questions for the real estate gurus?
One thing I would mention as far as upcoming programs, next week we've got World Water with Gary and Joe. Diane Chido, who was going to be today with the Peace Builders, is going to be in April. One good thing, I finally hooked up with Eric Kasparovich, and I had already talked to the 2 soccer coaches from Mars. So either I want to get them in person. So late May, sometime in June, we'll have a luncheon with the state champion coaches from Pine Richland and Mars. And then I've also talked to a couple of the farmer people that we had here before, and we'll get them here probably in May or June as well.
All right. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day. Happy St. Patty's Day.
You too.
Amen.
See ya.
Bye.